Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. Again, I'm Scott Earnest. I'm Associate Director for Construction at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. As part of the NORA Construction Sector Council, along with OSHA, CPWR, Artba, and our panel, we're happy to be part of the National Safety Stand Down to Prevent Struck By Incidents. I want to thank each of you for participating and for the work that you do every day to prevent deaths and injuries to construction workers, especially in work zones. I also want to thank Brad Sant from Artba, Alana Klein from Liberty Mutual, and Ron Sokol of the Texas City Safety Council for their leadership and planning for this event and for their work to prevent struck by injuries in construction. We've got an exciting and informative lineup of webinars this week. Today is our current kickoff event focusing on preventing struck by incidents in highway work zones. Also at 3 o'clock today, there's a Spanish language webinar on preventing struck bys. Then coming up on Wednesday, April 13th at 2 o'clock, we'll have a webinar on struck by injuries from heavy equipment and crane activities. And then lastly, on Thursday, April 14th at 2, we'll be having another webinar on struck by incidents involving dropped objects and other items. The next few slides, I wanted to touch on some data from CPWR, the National Construction Center, about struck by incidents. Struck by incidents are part of the Focus 4 hazards in the construction industry. Focus 4 hazards caused 709 construction deaths in 2019, or approximately 64% of all construction fatalities that occurred that year. So this slide shows data from 2011 to 2019 for all four of the Focus 4 hazards. The dark blue at the bottom is falls. The orange is struck by, the light blue is electrocutions, and then the gray is caught in between. So as you can see in 2019, fatal falls to a lower level represented 401 fatalities that year, about a third of all construction fatalities. But the next number, this 170, is the struck by incidents. And typically it's second only to falls in terms of the number of fatalities that are occurring in the construction industry. If you look across each of these years, the number of fatalities in orange related to struck by incidents ranges from anywhere from 150 to 180 fatalities each and every year, which is just a terrible tragedy. I also wanted to share some additional data from CPWR. This slide shows the number of fatal injuries in construction by the top five events. This is data between 2018 and 2020. And as you can see right up at the top here, again, that's slips, trips, and falls, and then falls to a lower level. So the total number of those is 376, but the vast majority of those are the falls to the lower level in orange, falling from elevation. But the other important thing here when it comes to these fatal events is, which I have a blue box around, is these are struck by, a lot of these are struck by incidents. There's transportation incidents, roadway incidents involving motorized and land vehicles, where there's a total of 273 fatalities, and then a couple rows down, contact with objects and equipment, struck by object or equipment. There's 160 of those events. So you add those two up, there's a lot of things occurring there where you have struck by and it's resulting in fatalities. And then the next slide is for non-fatal injuries. And the interesting thing about this, for the number of non-fatal injuries in construction by top five events, you can see here the number one cause of non-fatal injuries is actually struck by objects and equipment, right up here at the top. And then, so that actually supersedes slips, trips, and falls when it comes to non-fatal. And then we still have these transportation incidents down here at the bottom, where there's approximately 3,500 of those occurring in roadways that are non-fatal. So again, a lot of non-fatal injuries related to struck by, either in the highways or other types of struck by incidents. Wanted to briefly mention the infrastructure bill. For those in the construction industry, the infrastructure bill will support transportation, climate, energy and the environment, and broadband. The type of construction projects that will be funded include rebuilding of roads and bridges, upgrading and constructing transportation terminals and ports, repairing gas distribution pipelines, building a network of electric vehicle charging stations, replacing lead pipes, improving the energy efficiency of existing structures, constructing water distribution systems and treatment plants, and expanding access to broadband. So again, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work going on really over the next 8 to 10 years. And it's important that when this work is done, that it be done safely. And so we've developed a lot of different materials that are available on our website that can be useful. That's the NIOSH website, the CPWR website, the OSHA website, as well as the Artba website. So we just wanted to point that out and refer you to that. And with that, I want to go ahead and turn things over to Brad Sant, who will moderate our event today and get us started. Brad?
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. And we're excited to be involved with the National Stand Down to prevent struck-by incidents. Again, for those of you who don't know Scott, he's kind of the chief guru here as far as construction safety goes at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. And he's been there for quite a while. He was first, prior to his position now as the Associate Director of the Office of Construction Safety, Scott was the engineering branch chief in the NIOSH Division of Applied Research and Technology. He began his career as an active duty commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so he's a registered professional engineer, a certified safety professional, and also has an MS and PhD degrees in industrial and mechanical engineering. So Scott is a great person to have on our team and to lead us through this effort. Now, I'll introduce our panel now before we get into the full discussion. So I'm Brad Sant. I serve right now as the Senior Vice President of Safety and Education for the American Road and Transportation Builders Association. I've been here 24 years. I'm also honored to co-chair the NIOSH's NORA Construction Sector Council Work Group on Struck-by Incidents. Also joining us on our panel, we have some very distinguished guests that I think you'll enjoy hearing. David Ferraro is the construction project manager at the Connecticut Department of Transportation, where he served for over 30 years with experience in construction project management, primarily focused on heavy and highway and bridge projects throughout the state of Connecticut. He's been involved in many of the largest programs and multifaceted projects undertaken by the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and he considers himself lucky to have worked on these projects with some of the best people in the industry. Next, a good friend, Lara Haizenga, and she's the technical sales manager for the Road Zipper product at Lindsay Transportation. But her resume is much broader than that. She is a past chair of Artba's Traffic Safety Industry Division, a board member, and also a former member of the executive committee there. She has been active and is well known in the roadway safety industry for over 20 years and is a very respected leader and advocate for us. Next, we'll hear from Marchel Johnson, who is the Assistant Director of Safety for the Security and Emergency Management Division at the Virginia Department of Transportation. And Virginia is our host for National Work Zone Awareness Week, and we'll have our kickoff event there tomorrow in the Hampton Roads area for this enormous bridge tunnel road project going on out there, over $1 billion project. But Mrs. Johnson has served for over 20 years with experience in occupational safety and health, and for the last 8 years, she's worked at VDOT. And then wrapping up our session today, we're very lucky to have with us Martha Kapitanov, who is currently serving as a transportation specialist at the Federal Highway Administration headquarters on the Work Zone Management team. Martha has worked for Federal Highway Administration for over 20 years, and in her current capacity, she provides leadership and guidance to the development and implementation of effective work zone management practices and innovations at the national level. She also is a leader, leads many of the projects that the Federal Highway Administration has with the private sector, universities, and others as we work in partnership to develop training programs, guidance documents, and many other outreach programs, all focused on work zone safety. So we're lucky to have her with us today. She holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Puerto Rico, and she'll be also speaking to us in our Spanish session later this afternoon. So we have a terrific panel of presenters, and we are really excited to hear from them. So without further ado, let me jump in to the session that I'm going to be moderating here. So let's go ahead to the next slide. All right, and so what I want to do to introduce the panel and introduce the topic today is just kind of set a stage for what's going to be going on here. and talk about some of the impacts that we can maybe anticipate from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that's the massive infrastructure bill that we've been hearing about for some time that will have a significant impact on our industry, on the construction industry in general, and then today for our specific section on work zones. Next slide, please. So looking at federal data, and there's some very good information that has been put out by Martha's office, a great fact sheet that we'll add to the resources here, looking at what's happening in roadway construction. But we know it's not new that roadway construction is a dangerous situation, simply because it changes the norm for both the motorists and the workers. The roads are not what the motorists would expect to see, and so therefore it can be a hazardous situation. We've seen a spike in the recently released federal data for 2020. We saw that 857 people died in work zone crashes. And that's a significant jump over the previous year of 2019, which was also a high year. So that's got us concerned. And this is even before the infrastructure money is let. And then of those 857 people that died, 170 were classified as persons on foot and bicyclists. Pedestrians is what we'd call them. Now, what we are look at that number very carefully for is the way the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, they're the ones that compile this crash data for the United States. Our workers are categorized within that category of pedestrians. So we watch that number very carefully. And so when we look at those workers that are killed, and we see here a number of 135, that's reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, these numbers, we're concerned they may undercount because of the way we're able to search that BLS data. But in a simple search, this is what we see. Anticipate it may be much higher than that. But we know that there's that many that are killed at a minimum on the job site. And the leading cause of death for these workers is struck by. So as Scott shared with you, in the construction sector overall, the main killer is falls, and the number one cause of non-fatal accidents is struck by. However, in the heavy and civil sector of the construction industry, those struck by incidents are both the number one cause of fatalities and non-fatal injuries. Next slide, please. So there are a number of provisions in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, that deal specifically with what we're talking about today. One of those is significant increase in the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Now, that program is traditionally aimed at infrastructure improvements that make roads safer for motorists and to prevent run-off-the-road accidents and other things. However, some of that funding is now being allowed for that second bullet here, which is funding for automated speed enforcement in work zones. And we're going to talk about each of these bullets a little bit very quickly in order. Also, it allows for creation of safety contingency funds, and it emphasizes and requires those benchmarks for vulnerable road users. And that is, again, pedestrians are among those vulnerable road users, which includes roadway construction workers. And then finally, as Scott mentioned earlier, this bill delivers a 44% increase in core federal highway funding over the next, as we get started, it's going to jump significantly between this year and next. And then it doesn't, we don't have those high jumps, but it'll continue with record levels of funding, and we'll talk about that. So next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about speed safety cameras and automated enforcement. So as I mentioned, the Highway Safety Improvement Program is generally used for those infrastructure improvements that try to mitigate crashes, but it can be used for automated speed enforcement. And we're seeing, while this automated speed enforcement is not a new program, there's only been a couple of states that have made a lot of use of it over the years. And specifically, we think often of Illinois and Maryland. But then Pennsylvania started a couple of years ago. New York has started just this year. And so and other states are picking up. So we're seeing an uptick in this. We know that this automated speed enforcement, while as a driver, we may not like that too much, we know it is an effective tool because speeding is involved in approximately 1/3 of all highway crashes. And we know because of the experiences in Maryland and Illinois that those speed safety cameras do work. And so we're looking to see, hoping to see more of those. And again, that variability of speed is also a big cause of crashes when you have traffic going at different rates of speed. And so As traffic slows down abruptly, we get rear end crashes. So kind of evening that out through the use of speed cameras and getting people to obey posted speed limits, we see as a great mitigation for those accidents. And again, we have some policy on that we'll make available. Next slide, please. So contingency funds, this is a great program that we're very excited about. And so basically all it allows to do, typically when a construction project is funded, and these are publicly funded, there's laws in place about how it's done. And typically it's a low bid environment. So the contractor that goes in with the lowest bid gets the job. And so it's always been a concern about what do we do with those folks who are trying to do a better job, but maybe undercut by those who are not putting as much safety out there. And what happens now when we get out on a job site and the plans were drawn up, we anticipate a certain type of temporary traffic control, perhaps we're going to use drums and cones, but we get out there and the contractor says, this is not safe. We need a change in this temporary traffic control plan. We maybe need to use positive separation where that wasn't anticipated. In the past, making such a change was very difficult because it required getting new money. And once the contract is let, there's no new money. So what the IIJA did is it said, hey, states, you can create a contingency fund. You'll set aside a little pool of funds. And then if you come up on these unanticipated safety problems and the contractor and the DOT say, hey, we do have a problem, there's money to go in and change and fix that. So we're very excited about that provision. And it can allow for more positive protection between workers and motorists that we're excited about. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned earlier, NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, defines workers as pedestrians. And so what does that mean? Well, if anyone wants to take the time to read the IIJA, it's a lot of pages. But throughout that, you're going to see a lot of dedicated resources going to vulnerable road users. That are those road users that are typically viewed as pedestrians, cyclists, bicyclists, persons with disabilities that need personal conveyances. So that's often what people think about. But what we also want to emphasize is that those vulnerable road users, by definition, includes workers. And so as the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highways Office of Safety, they're right now beginning to write guidance documents for the states about how to improve safety for vulnerable road users, because we're seeing those fatalities and those injuries increase at great rates, even when other segments of crashes and fatalities are going down. So we're very concerned. We want to make sure workers are considered here, particularly when we talk about the DOT is looking about a safe system approach. That's like putting in engineering controls, as we would call it in occupational safety, to make sure that there's preventative measures in place to prevent people from being killed. That applies to workers. So we want to make sure they're not forgotten as we talk about vulnerable road users. So what's the impact on safety? So for a number of years, we have seen the number of fatalities in work zones increasing, and that's what this chart shows. What we've never been able to do, though, in the past is say, are they really increasing in real numbers, or is it just there's greater exposure, there are more work zones in place, so maybe we're not really in as bad a situation as we thought, right? So what we have done, we took those numbers of fatalities, and then we tried to normalize them, right? We compared them to how many industry workers are in place, that is the dotted line, and we compared them to the value of construction put in place. So every $1 billion of construction put in place is the solid line. And so when we normalize those increases in fatalities with both, those numbers are both independent. So they're both looking at it as compared to the number of industry workers as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the value of construction put in place, we're still seeing increases in work zone fatalities. So even normalizing those numbers, while we don't have exact numbers of work zones or workers that are exposed, if we normalize it for those two things, we're still seeing increases. So what does that mean when we see a huge jump in funding? If we don't do something, it could be a cause for some great concern. Next slide, please. So this is what we're looking at in federal highway investment. You see what's being spent in FY 2021 and what's going to happen in 2022, about a 40% increase. that's coming in under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And that's what this bar chart shows. This is Artba data and estimates based on federal highway data of what's going to happen. So we're seeing a significant increase in funding. Next slide, please. So if we project that on a typical road construction project, we know that on average, federal funds support about 15,300 construction projects based a year. And that's based on information that we gathered from the Dodge reports. So this means that on average, we have about 370 projects for every $1 billion in federal highway funding. So what happens when we increase that significantly? We anticipate 4,000 additional work sites beginning in next year. And so unless we do something, we looked at that chart a few earlier, to change that rate, we could see some real causes for concern. Greater spending, more workers, more work sites. And so that is why what we're doing here today and this information we're sharing is so critically important. Next slide, please. So that's why we're anxious to hear from our fellow presenters, and we will turn the time over to them to talk about what they have done well and what more we can do. So we're first happy to hear from David, who has some very great story to tell. So take it away, David.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Brad. All right, so let's get started here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to take a minute, again, I'm Dave Ferraro, just take a minute to introduce myself. I came from a family of contractors, so contracting and project management are in my blood. As such, I've worked in the I worked in the construction industry my entire life. Oop, want to bear with me here. There we go. Sorry about that, little technical difficulties. I started at Connecticut DOT in 1994 after working for a consultant company doing DOT work for a few years. I've worked my way up from a construction inspector to a construction project manager. I've always been safety conscious, but in 1995, after I was struck in a work zone, my passion for highway worker safety and protecting my co-workers became one of my primary goals. I strongly believe that every worker should come home safe to his or her family after every work shift. On the night of November 16th, 1995, I was working on I-95 in Greenwich, Connecticut. For those that don't know, Greenwich is on the border with New York. We were paving I-95 southbound less than a half a mile from the New York border. That bottom picture that you see shows an orange circle. That orange circle is the exact location that I was struck. It was at the beginning of the night, at the point where all workers are prepared to start paving, but we are waiting for the first loads of bituminous to show up. This section of I-95 is 3 lanes, and we had the right and center lane closed at the time. We were all standing behind the paver going over final details when a co-worker and fellow inspector pulled up in the closed center lane to speak with us. Another inspector and I approached the pickup truck with our backs to traffic, the active left lane. A few moments later, a drunk driver who had fallen asleep crashed into the front of the pickup truck. However, prior to that, he hit me. He bounced off the truck, back into the active lane, and quickly sped up and into New York. At the time, I was dazed and didn't realize that I had been struck. Prior to him hitting the truck, he'd hit a bunch of cones, sending them flying in all directions. Me and my coworkers had also been hit by cones. I thought that I was initially hit by cones only. Upon inspection from a state police officer, he noticed that my jeans were ripped and there was gray paint on my butt, gray paint from the car. At that point, they called me in the ambulance and took me to the closest hospital. How could it have been worse? Well, for one, I'm still standing, and my coworker that was next to me didn't get hit or hurt. If the collision point was just a few inches different, the both of us would have been crushed between the two vehicles. If the driver didn't crash into the truck and bounce back into the active lane, he would have crashed into the back of the paver and seriously hurt or killed 6 highway workers that were standing there. The good news is I survived. No one got hurt, and no one else got hurt, I should say, and the Connecticut State Police chased and captured the driver in New York. Now let me take a second or a few minutes here to explain some of the things we do here in Connecticut to educate the public, protect highway workers, and try to reduce work zone accidents. In 1995, we created the Work Zone Safety Campaign, and it was formed to do just that, to spread our message. So the mission of our campaign is to be Connecticut's extension of the national campaign to raise awareness about the hazards of work zones and be a voice for Connecticut roadway workers' safety within work zones in the state's transportation network. We do this in conjunction with other agencies like NHTSA, Federal Highway, the National Work Zone Safety Clearinghouse, and NASA. Our vision is to reach every driver in Connecticut's transportation communities to impress the importance of driving in and through work zones safely, driving work zone accidents and fatalities down to zero. That's our goal. We want to see these at zero. Who are we? So, as I indicated, the campaign was founded in 1999. It's a group of all types from all different disciplines. So we have volunteers from the DOT that work in different disciplines, maintenance, design, construction, like myself. We also open the campaign up to utility companies, other agencies here within the state, the local police, and the state police also are involved in the campaign. All these people that you see in this photo, they volunteer, and they do this most of the time on their own time, usually nights and weekends. We'll get a little more into that and what we do. So who do we honor? We honor all men and women who have perished while working in highway work zones. That's what we're here for, as far as honoring those that have gone before us. What do we do? So we, through the campaign, we develop public service announcements. We do public outreach and education. We have social media accounts where we bump out our message. And we obviously, like we are today, participate in the National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week. So some of the things that we do, this is an example. That's one of our volunteers, Mike. Mike is at an event, and we pass out swag. We call it our little orange swag. So just little things, pencils, bracelets, stickers, just to remind people. You know, they see the orange and remind them to slow down in work zones. We do contract with venues, so we can do events like concerts, ball games. We set up at those events similarly here with a table like this. When you put a face and actual people in front of the public, and they can actually talk about working in work zones, and they put a real face on it, it's very effective. Most people don't think much about that. They just think about, I need to get to work, or I need to get to the ball game, and they just come, speeding through our work zones and don't really think necessarily of the people that are working in them. So one of the ways we do that is through our mascots. So we have 3 mascots here that you can see. We have Slow Down Sam, Work Zone Wally, and Darryl the Barrel Dog. So these mascots go out with us on the road as well. They're great for photo ops and, again, for just conversation. Sam is a huge hit with the kids. He's the most popular mascot when we go to any of the events. So it's a good thing to put again a face and a name to something versus just an orange sign. So this is an example of one of our social media videos that we do. This is Sam. So we put out little videos like this. They're very popular on social media, again, to just spread the message to slow down in work zones and don't drive distracted. Here's some photos just to depict some of the things that we do. So the top photo is our National Work Zone Safety press conference that we have. That'll be tomorrow. Usually in conjunction with that, we hold a poster contest where we have children from schools around the state participate in a poster contest. It's a great way to get the kids involved, and obviously the parents as well. The upper right is a food drive where we host events like food drives. Touch a Truck is the bottom left corner that you see there. We do a lot of Touch a Truck local events. The bottom right one is a charity event that we did, a 5K run. Again, we set up at these events and just give our message out to the public. So this is an example of one of our commercials.
Obey the orange. Slow down for work zones.
And here's another commercial.
Honey, time to go.
In a work zone, there are more than trucks behind the cones.
Workers put their lives on the line to make our roads safer. Please slow down for work zones.
I've seen that commercial well over 1,000 times probably, and it still gives me chills. It's a strong message that works very well. So why do we do what we do? We do it for the men and women in this picture, my co-workers and highway workers across the country. Let me take a moment to just share some statistics from our little place here called Connecticut. They're not as staggering as the national level, but when you take into the account of the size of Connecticut, they're pretty staggering. 2019, there were 1,079 crashes in work zones. Of those crashes, 6 resulted in fatalities, removing people from their families, careers, and futures. In 2020, there were 880 crashes reported in work zones and 4 fatalities. In 2021, there were 748 crashes reported in work zones, with 3 tragic fatalities. And within just the first 2 months of 2022, there was already 17 crashes in our work zones. So these are some pictures, the next couple slides here are some pictures from my current project. I'm currently out on the I-84 Route 8 interchange in Waterbury, Connecticut. These are just a few of the accidents that we have out here. We average 1 serious accident a week in our work zones. In these photos here that you see, the upper ones taken at night, in both cases, the tractor trailers displaced 1,000 feet or more of barrier. But in the upper one, the night photos, you can see how the barrier was pushed right up against the equipment, so that the truck and the excavator had the barrier pushed up right against it. Thank God nobody was hurt or injured in these accidents, in both of them. The daytime accident that you see there is a tractor trailer that hit an attenuation system at best we can guess full speed, and literally ripped the front axle off of his tractor trailer. He had pushed barrier into the bridge parapet, and just moments before that there was a crew working there, but thank God they had left that area just before the accident occurred. A few more photos for you here. It's not uncommon to see rollover accidents out here quite often, actually, which is pretty sad. All right, so that gets us to the next thing. So what's the future of work zone safety? The 2 most frequent causes of work zone accidents are speeding and distracted driving. On my current project, the one I just mentioned before, the average speed in our work zone is 68 miles an hour. That's 68 miles an hour in a 45. Now, over the years, we've done much better with improving work zone safety by enforcing things with things like double fines, so that the public gets a double fine in a work zone, posted radar signs that show you your actual speed as you're driving through the work zone. But the traveling public gets complacent over time, resulting in less effectiveness. In Connecticut, we even conduct speed enforcement on interstates. I'm sorry, there's a thing distracting me there. Sorry about that. In Connecticut, we conduct speed enforcement on interstate projects with the use of our state police officers. We hire state police to conduct radar enforcement within our work zones. It helps, but it doesn't impact enough motorists, so we don't see lasting effects. So what can we do? Well, Brad had mentioned this a little bit earlier as far as automated speed control. So late last year, Connecticut followed other states like Maryland and Pennsylvania to add automated speed control devices and cameras to active construction projects, which required legislative approval here in Connecticut. This summer, the DOT will implement a pilot program to test these devices and see how effective they actually are in Connecticut. Studies from other states have shown that they are very effective. During the pilot project or program, there's still a lot to be worked out, but Any motorist going 15 miles an hour over the posted speed limit in a highway work zone will have their license plates recorded. The first violation means a warning, the second violation means a $75 fine, and a third violation means a $150 fine. Tickets are mailed directly to the vehicle's owner's home. In Pennsylvania in 2020, over 200,000 violations were issued. We look forward to bringing these technologies to our work zones in Connecticut as we strive to bring work zone accidents and incidents down to zero. And it's obviously pretty serious and our lives depend on it. So with that, I'm going to turn the control back over here. All right.
Thank you so much, David. And if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A. We're going to save them for the end just to make sure that everyone has time to present. So we know Lara has a hard stop at 1 o'clock today, or 2 o'clock today, so we're going to let her go next, and she's going to talk to us about options for positive protection. So take it away, Lara.
Thanks, Brad. Can you guys hear me okay? Fantastic. So my first slide is a little bit of a repeat from what Brad showed you and also from what we saw from David. And it talks about the statistics, and we've seen such a dramatic uptick in vehicle intrusion, work zone accidents, fatalities, and injuries. The one thing that really struck me about this one, though, was that the first quote is from the Pew Charitable Trusts. It wasn't from the FHWA, it wasn't from NIOSH, it wasn't NHTSA, it was the Pew Charitable Trust, where they're saying work zones are particularly dangerous because of the daily changes in traffic patterns and narrowed right-of-ways and other construction activities. And we know that often our crews are working really, really close to traffic and just a few feet away. We've seen a dramatic uptick in consideration of separating workers from the motorists through a variety of different means, and we're seeing greater emphasis put on this from the FHWA by including subpart K language about positive protection in work zones in the MUTCD that came out in the NPA, which we're hoping is published later this year. Lots of acronyms. It's our industry. Sorry about that on a Monday. So the next slide that I have is looking at traditional positive protection options. And these are things that a lot of people know about and we use often. And when it's possible to close a travel lane or lanes for a long duration, static barrier is often selected, and it's a great option. You can have steel static barrier, concrete static barrier, there's water-filled options. The one thing that we need to be mindful of, and I think more and more designers and planners, engineers are getting very, very adept at this, is choosing the right positive protection option, depending on the speeds, the deflection, where it's being put into place. So it is a really good option if you can do it. Most often selected only for those long duration lane closures. So what do you do if you have not a long duration lane closure? Are you left to just channelizing devices? Well, when it's not possible to close a lane with static barrier, many designers often gravitate to channelizing devices, and they use that to delineate lane closures. And these devices are great at providing motorists with guidance past a work zone. However, they do not offer any intrusion protection whatsoever. Movable and mobile barriers provide both positive protection and the ability to only close travel lanes in the non-peak time periods, much like your channelizing device lane closures for nightly lane closures, off-peak closures. And these options provide safe barrier separation from the motoring public for the workers, as well as maintaining mobility by providing the lanes open during those peak traffic hours. If you can't use a barrier option, either static or movable, there are a variety of other options that are coming on the market. There's many strategies such as intrusion alarms, and these offer some awareness. And these could include high-tech options like temporary rumble strips in advance of the work zone, truck-mounted attenuators, and then there's the intrusion alarms. There's a variety of manufacturers. If I mention one, I'm going to miss one, so I'm not going to do that because I don't want to exclude anyone. But these intrusion alarms alert you when a cone or a drum has been run over so that the workers have some awareness of you've got to get out of the way. And then there's also manual options, and these could include frequently inspecting and cleaning channelizing devices, or maybe even just using a spotter. Now, I know that cleaning devices seems like a weird one. I cut my teeth in this industry at a traffic control company. And I got to tell you, one of the jobs they made me do is they made me go out and take video and photos of our work zones, which I thought was a lot of fun. 3 a.m, you're running around taking some, having a dash cam and taking pictures of the work zone. But the thing that was really surprising is that depending on the work that was taking place, such as concrete cutting, that concrete dust would coat the barrels and they'd virtually disappear. They just weren't there. And during the day, they were also a lot harder to see. So at night, they're gone. There's no retroreflectivity left. And during the day, they were also really hard to see. So some of those things that we need to look at and consider really are some of the manual things that we can do to help provide awareness and visibility of the work zones. But how do we eliminate work zone intrusion fatalities? I know that we're doing Vision Zero and Towards Zero Death, and there's a variety of campaigns underway to try to help us drive down those numbers. And honestly, it all starts with project design. Work zone safety must be considered during initial project design and scoping to determine the best safety strategy as well as plan for the cost of this strategy. When possible, try to design the project to separate work zone activities and motorists. Many states are allowing full roadway closures or full travel bound closures, one direction of a multi-lane highway. And that provides a safe and efficient work zone because what better way to keep motorists and workers separate other than closing the road? Now you have to consider the mobility of that. And, some areas it's not possible to do. Maybe you need to have a crossover. Maybe there's a good alternate route, but it's a great option that's being employed. If you can't do a full closure and it's not feasible, you might want to consider all positive barrier options. That could be static, that could be mobile barrier, like the mobile barrier trailer that showed you a couple slides ago, or movable barrier like the product Lindsay that I work for, the company I work for, represents. If positive protection is not a viable option, try to provide work zone intrusion prevention options. However, I got to tell you one thing that's not going to work, and that's leaving safety up to the prime contractor. As Brad said, it's a low bid environment. And if you leave it up to the prime contractor and you haven't specified the level of separation and protection that's required, it is always going to be devices like you see in this picture here, channelizing devices, because those are the lowest cost option. And it's not that contractors don't care about safety. They care a lot. It's just that in a low bid environment, you can't afford to put out a static barrier or a mobile trailer or a movable barrier option. It's just not going to work. To reduce or eliminate work zone intrusions, roadway owners must design safety elements into their project, and often with safety standards or specifications, and provide funding to pay for those safety solutions. I've seen an uptick in standards. Many states have safety and mobility policies, which are phenomenal. And some are starting to augment and enhance those, like Indiana, Michigan, and California. I'm only picking those three because they're top of mind. Please don't be offended if I've missed your state, where they in the last few years have made an increased consideration of separation, whether that's a closure or movable barrier or mobile barrier trailers or static barrier, and allowing for mobility to be impeded a bit during the construction. So those states have taken a stronger stance, and they have safety policies that are helping to consider more positive protection. Now, I know one of the questions that came in earlier was all about how do we get states to encourage the use of positive protection through Artba, and it's something I personally believe as well. We're seeing that if the state has a safety policy and procedure and they have standards that they adhere to, that is the best way, because then those systems and those positive protection options are funded. They're included in the scoping, and it's also there. Now, I know Texas, for example, they also have a contingency fund, and I know many states do. Texas is top of mind, and Brad mentioned contingency funds, and those are there. So if you have a safety concern, you might be able to change some of the maintenance of traffic devices and strategies on an existing project. So some of those things can be helpful too. I hope this information has been helpful to you. If I can be of any assistance, never hesitate to reach out to me. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lara. We really appreciate your expertise here, and I think there will probably be some interest in following up. Well, let's move on to another state DOT, and we'll let Marchel talk to us about what they have going on at Virginia. Apparently some good stuff.
Well, good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. I guess it is in some places. It still might be morning. So VDOT here in Virginia, we had some challenges when COVID started, just like everyone else did. But two things that helped us probably be successful in the reduction of fatalities was we had our Virginia OSHA, or our Occupational Safety and Health here in Virginia, passed a temporary infectious disease program that required us to put certain controls into place. Along with that, we also had some governor directives that required us to do some things as well. So those combinations and working with our contracting partners, we were able to keep an open line of communication going so that we were able to continue to work, and we kept our practices in place where we protected our employees from COVID. So with all that, in 2020, our partnership with our industry allowed VDOT to complete 2,000 more projects, totaling over 30,000 more lane miles, with an increase in about 500,000 man hours worked. And we were able to reduce our fatalities from 17 fatalities to 11 fatalities that we could contribute to the work zone. One of the things that we did see, though, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, is we saw a huge increase in high rates of speed, where and we're still seeing that here in Virginia, especially on the 81 and 95 corridors, where we're seeing speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour or more. So that's a little bit disheartening. We're also seeing an increase in alcohol-related events, as well as a lack of seatbelt use, which is disturbing. We've had, unfortunately, in 2021, we had several ejections, which contributed to the fatalities. So that's, for us, that's a little bit disheartening that we're seeing. But we do have some best practices that we have in place that I think have helped contribute to keep our employees and our contract partners safe. And I think it's really important for everybody to understand that we here at VDOT look at our contract partners as just that, partners. We are not able, because we don't do very much work on our interstate system ourselves. It's all contractors that provide that work. So we look at them as part of our family. So one thing that we have done, Virginia has a supplement to Chapter 6 of the MUTCD. It's called the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual, and that provides best practices for temporary traffic control. Basically what it does is anybody that's working in the road right of way to have some level of training, and we have 3 levels: basic, intermediate, and then an advanced. One of the problems, or one of the hiccups that we found, is that during the pandemic, it provided us a challenge on how are we going to implement this training. So we implemented various strategies to continue to have that education going. We developed and were able to deliver virtual options to our own state forces, as well as our contracting partners. And we were still able to train over 4,500 individuals during the height of the pandemic. I know one of the questions earlier, or the pre-questions, was about allowable lane miles or hours of operation. And here in Virginia, we have we have 9 districts, and each district has their own allowable lane closure hours. And it's based on traffic volumes on the interstates, high volume primary and secondary routes. So we did evaluate those, and because we saw some lower traffic volumes, we were able to expand some of those hours and allowing our contractors to accomplish more work. So we were flexible. We looked at different things that were going on around the state, different locations, and we're able to provide services to keep Virginia moving. And one good example of that is we routinely have what we call red letter weekends. One's coming up. So at noon on Friday, all of our road work and work zones will be shut down, and they will be suspended until noon on the following Tuesday. So we look at our high traffic volumes, especially since, we've got routes to the beach, routes to DC, 81 and 95 are main thoroughfares for the traveling public. I think some of the other best practices, we've really started looking at safety enhancements throughout our organization in general, but also with our work zones. We've really looked at the legislative support. And some of the things that we've done is we have the move over laws, but we've ensured that the amber lights have been included in that. We have hands-free devices and texting. It's now a primary offense. If our state or local law enforcement see you, they are able to pull you over and ticket you. And then most recently, I think like Brad and David talked about, we recently got photo speed enforcement passed through our General Assembly here in Virginia. So we're excited about that. We're projected to put that in, I think, June of this year. We'll be starting that on some of our long-term projects. Additionally, we've implemented rumble strips of various types of rumble strips, the portable temporary rumble strips, as well as identifying those locations or those roadways where we've seen intrusion or we're doing work zones and there's problems. We've also done a variety of things that way with the rumble strips. Our personal protective equipment is a big thing. Virginia has recently, our commissioner supported this initiative, and we've gone away from the traditional hard hat, and we've implemented the casque helmet for our state forces to provide better protection from side frontal and back impact. Additionally, one of the changes that we've recently made is to high visibility gear related to installing, maintaining, and removing traffic control devices. We now allow the high visibility leg gaiters or Class E trousers. Class E trousers are mandatory regardless for nighttime flagging operations. What we have seen with the addition and allowing of the high visibility leg gaiters, we're seeing more workers wearing leg gaiters, whether it's our contract partners or state forces, wearing leg gaiters anytime they're in the work zone, which I think just contributes to, the more visibility that we have out there in the roadway. We're looking at all kinds of lighting, additional lighting, non-glare lighting, amber lights. One of the things that we don't require amber lights to be on in a work zone, only when you're entering and exiting the work zone. We found there's some studies done, and we found that leaving lights on sometimes in the work zone can cause distraction. Some, people often laugh about, the lights are on, that's kind of a magnet. People draw, their eyes are drawn toward the lights, the car veers that way. Next thing you know, you have a driver that's out of control. And I think one of the biggest things that we've been encouraging, not just state forces, but our contract partners, is when a safety event, regardless of what type of safety event occurs, that we have a safety stand down with all the parties are on site to evaluate and prevent that from happening again. And we've had some significant events occur here in Virginia. And I think the communication is the key and education is the key as well. Well, there we go. Some of the other best practices or safety enhancements that we've done is we're using more and more programmable message boards, whether we use the pull behinds to communicate to our public, or whether we have the overhead traffic signs, we're using those more and more. We have a lot of smart work zone devices that we're implementing into our work zones. I think one of the other big things for us here in Virginia, again, Virginia OSHA, we're a state plan state, so they have some unique standards. One is the reverse signal operations, which requires either an audible alarm or a spotter, depending on the situation. And they enforce that. They have also adopted that they will enforce work zone setups. Lots of times we get tapped to, ask questions when it comes to maybe some safety violations that have occurred. They do come if there is a fatality or significant injury in a work zone. They are notified. They do come. A lot of them have been through the work zone basic or intermediate training, so they're aware of it. We're also always evaluating safer technologies, and just to name a few, we have a work zone customer survey tool. It's on our website that the general public can go through, do a survey, provide feedback, ways that we can enhance or look at those things that we as people in the work zone or in the traffic environment, we see on a day-to-day basis, but the general motoring public may see it a little bit differently. We have a smart work zone toolbox now. We're looking at some smart vests in conjunction with our research council and some other places. We're talking a lot about lane intrusion technologies. So it sounds like everybody's kind of headed that way. Some of those we've tested and we've tried. But I think for the most part here in Virginia, the biggest thing that has helped us, I think, is the interdepartmental collaboration, where we have a work zone management advisory committee, and that's an interdisciplinary group of people that come together to look at work zones in different ways, on how we can improve the work zones for our people, so that at the end of the day, everyone's going home safe, as well as the general motoring public. So I just wanted to thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Marchel. We really appreciate you being here with us. And now we're going to hear from Martha Kapitanov from the Federal Highway Administration. Take it away, Martha.
Thank you, Brad. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. I will go over a few slides. So before I start with my presentation, there's a disclaimer that I need to share with any presentation. It's basically, this presentation was created and it's being presented by Federal Highway of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The view and opinion expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of Federal Highway or U.S. DOT. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the Department of Transportation and do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the public in any way. Okay, so quick, these are the topics that I'll go over. National Works and Awareness Week, which is this week, some potential strategic objectives for a National Works on Safety Strategic Plan, and some resources. So yes, this week is National Works and Awareness Week. In case you were not aware, there are several activities planned for this week. Today being the safety training day, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. And I hope you're learning from all these great presentations as we had so far, and the other one at 3 o'clock today. The national kickoff event, as Brad mentioned, is going to happen tomorrow in Hampton Roads, Virginia, since VDOT is the host for this year's national press release event. On the 13th is Go Orange Day, so please wear orange, take pictures, share in social media, and social media storm as on April 14th. So again, it will be a great opportunity to remind others of National Works and Awareness Week. And then this year is the first time that we have the moment of silence, and we want people to stop throughout their day and remember the people that died in work zones. So what we have done, we had a contract in place, and we asked our contractor to look at the national data from 2015 to 2019, when 2020 wasn't available, when our contractor was reviewing the data. And we actually also asked 10 state DOTs to share some of their data, and we got about 7 or 8 states that were able to share some of the data. And when our contractor looked at the data, found that since 2015, unfortunately, work zone crashes have been increasing. That interstates were overrepresented in rural, urban, different times of the day. Rear end collisions were also a trend. High-risk subpopulations, as we have heard throughout the day, the highway workers, commercial motor vehicles, motorcyclists as well. But we also found that there are some behavior contributors. We heard speeding, distraction in other states, and at a national level, it is happening. Tailgating as well, and different areas within the work zones. And interesting enough, it was not only for active work zones, there were also during inactive work zones. So what we did was we had a great advisory panel. We have representatives from AASHTO, ADSA, RTVA, NEOSH, 2 state DOTs, Illinois, Texas. We had representatives from LTAP, we had Federal Motor Carrier, NHTSA, and different offices within Federal Highways serving that panel. And basically, we asked for them to give us a national perspective, whether these potential strategic objectives made sense, who else should be invited to provide comments on this plan. And we had 4 regional workshops. These were virtual. And we were able to have different representatives. We had about 200 people join the workshops, and we got a great amount of feedback. So I will share now some of the potential strategic objectives that this plan or summary report will have. There are no means in a particular order. It's more I'm going to share the same way we shared with the workshop participants. So again, just one of them was to expand the usefulness of data-driven safety analysis. So it's not necessarily just where the event or the safety data is happening, or the safety data is more a comprehensive data analysis that can help state DOTs and local agencies improve their work zone management process. Another one was the use of work zone event data. For some of you that may not be aware, as a US DOT, we are promoting the use of work zone data exchange and having some feeds on our uniform platform where state DOTs can share that information, up-to-date information, but they can also analyze it at a later date to find out more on how they can improve their work zones. Another potential strategic objective was to reduce commercial motor vehicle crashes in work zones. For those of you that may not be aware, another one of my initiatives is working closely with 10 opportunity states to improve commercial motor vehicle safety in work zones, because unfortunately, about 30% of all crashes involve a commercial motor vehicle. And when I said involve, it does not mean that the CMV was at fault. It's almost about 50%. So it's either the commercial motor vehicle impacted a vehicle or was impacted by another vehicle. Another strategic objective is to reduce drivers' behavior that contribute fatal and injury work zone crashes. Another one is workspace intrusions and a worker struck by. You heard Lara talk about some of the examples that some of the states are doing. California being one that recently implemented a policy for temporary work zone intrusion. So if you would like to learn more about states like that, I'll share some resources, but the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse website does have an example like California. Another area that we seek information was improve accommodation of pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized users through and around work zones. And before I forget, you will see these potential strategic objectives. Again, they're in no particular order, but also the wording may change because, again, we receive a lot of great feedback, and there's also some feedback from the panel members. So when you see the final report, hopefully later on this year, you will see that some of these wordings may change. But again, the point here is mainly these strategic objectives that we found that need some work at a national level. And when I forgot to mention that this plan is for anybody who work in the work zone environment to also find ways to help reduce work zone crashes and fatalities in work zones. So that's why this national plan or summary report is not just for federal highways, for all stakeholders. That's why we had the stakeholders of AASHTO, ADSA, RTBA, and others involved with this efforts, because we understand that we cannot just do this by ourselves, that we need that strong collaboration with our partners. Some other areas that we looked at was, or that we shared, was improve accommodations of motorcycles. We also have, if we need to identify, evaluate, and encourage implementation of effective low-cost improvement to temporary traffic control, again, as long as they follow the manual and uniform traffic control devices request for experimentation. Then the other, as you know, we are moving forward with connected and autonomous vehicles. So we want to also look into how we can marry the connected and autonomous vehicles with work zones. The other, another potential strategic objectives is improve consideration of traffic incident management needs in work zones. And this is more the collaboration side, working from the design stage and how traffic incident can be managed in a work zone setup. Another one that we found, there are two, the next two, apply to all of these first 10 that I mentioned. It's not only the workforce development, but it's the research. So when you think about workers, pedestrian safety, traffic incident management, there is a need for training as well as research. So some of these 12 were the potential strategic objectives that were discussed during our workshops. Again, we're hoping to have a summary report with the strategic objectives later on this year. And some of the resources that you may or may not be familiar with, we have the Federal Highway Work Zone Management website with a lot of training, fact sheet resources, a lot of great information. We have a National Work Zone Awareness Week dedicated webpage with also links to other organizations that also have some tools to promote work zone safety. And then the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse website. In case you didn't know, they have done a great job, and there's a new look. So I encourage you to visit the website with a lot of trainings, fact sheets, videos, and I'm going to share, in case you haven't had time, these are some screenshots that of the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse, also known as the Clearinghouse. But right now it has a poster, it has the 2020 data, which is the latest data available at the national level. This is not a federal highway or the Clearinghouse data. This is based on the NHTSA FARS data, as well as if you're looking for workers, it will be in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So again, that information comes from NHTSA FARS and or BLS data. So I was going to say, so you see there are some tabs about training, topic of interest, but then in the middle of the page, there will be more information and opportunities for you to find work zone training. So I will share what great things they have done. There is something for flaggers. There's online training courses also for designers. There are some toolboxes, and there's an interactive tool for maps. So if you want, with a map for states, so if you're wondering what are the state requirements, I encourage you to visit that. And if we're missing something, please let us know. I know Brad and his team are doing a great job. They're also monitoring and adding information as we speak. So if you find something that is not there, please let us know. And then this is just an example of all the great tools that RTVA under the Federal Highway Work Zone Safety Grant Program have developed. They have some fall prevention fact sheets. There are some very good videos that you could use with your partners throughout this week. There are online trainings for designers and others involved in work zones. And then there's these just-in-time videos that these are just examples. I think we're about to develop 3 or 4 more, and not only in English, they're also will be available in Spanish. So that is something that you may want to use during your safety topics, or safety talks, I should say, within your construction. And then last but not least, this is just an example. As we have said throughout the day, at the end of the day, we want everybody to be safe. Not only those who drive through the work zone, but also the workers. The workers, they want to go back to their family, and we want to achieve that. And the reason why I have this one in Spanish is not only because I will be speaking at 3 o'clock, but it's also because you, as a construction entity or a state DOT or those involved with work zones, you may want to look at other ways that you will need to reach out those workers, whether it's that they speak Spanish, they speak French, they speak in another language. You may want to look at that and see if there's other ways for you to do outreach. So again, that's the reason why I have that. Yes, we all want to go home and be safe. But again, if you can reach out to those workers in a way that they will understand, I will encourage to do that. And with that, I appreciate everybody's time and for inviting me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. And thank you for highlighting the Work Zone Clearinghouse. As you might be able to see in my background, though it may be a little bit small, the new logo for the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse, workzonesafety.org, officially launching today with its new website. A lot of great information and data, as Martha highlighted. All right, so now we have time to take some questions, a few minutes up until at the latest 2:30. And the first one I see, let's start out with our folks from Connecticut and Virginia, our DOT people. Question comes in from Charles. It says, since roadway work, unlike a lot of construction, is controlled by cities and states, what initiatives are various cities and states doing to protect workers since traditional efforts may not be enough? And Martha, you might be able to help with this as well, looking at a national perspective. Now, we know what you've shared, and this was asked, I think, earlier before the state DOTs shared their information. But anything that you've seen that you think would be a good model that others could do that's happening, that how the states and cities, because they do control those contracts?
I'll answer that for VDOT. Here in Virginia, we have our local emphasis or local assistance program, and our district safety managers are charged, along with our work zone safety coordinators, are charged with going out and evaluating those work zones, just as if it was a state job or one of our contractor jobs. So we really see no difference in whether it's a locality sponsored work zone, whether it's a state forces work zone, or whether it's a contractor. We look at that all together and ensure that our work area protection manual is enforced. And we will stop and we will remove people out of the roadway if we have to. And if they don't want to listen to us, then we have our nice Virginia State troopers that'll come and help us with that as well.
Thanks, Marchel. David, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
So I would just say, I think one of the things that Laura had mentioned during her presentation is a lot of this falls on the owners of these projects, so the states or the municipalities. One thing out here, you saw from some of the photos I shared, we do use Lindsay's barrier system out here. And although it's been struck a bunch of times, it's definitely reduced, any injuries or, God forbid, fatalities out here in Waterbury, Connecticut, because it does provide, positive protection. And I think that that's one thing that as owners we need to realize, that the only way to really, keep the workers safe and the traveling public safe is positive protection. Cones and drums can only do so much.
Thank you so much, David. Martha, anything to add as kind of a final thought on top of that, best practices?
Yeah, I will say the other thing that to add, it will be to also have an internal traffic control plan for the workers to be where it's safe for them to go, what are the escape routes, what to do in case there is an emergency. But I agree with VDOT and Connecticut DOT. So that will be the only thing that I will add.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question that pops up comes in from Suzanne, and she asks, has anyone tested the automatic cone placement? Here we go. Sorry, my thing scrolled up. Has anybody tested the automatic cone placement technologies that are out there? Seen videos that show how they place machine cones without having workers have to leave the truck. Anybody have experience with those?
We had one, it wasn't utilized, but what VDOT has done, and I'll see if I can grab a picture of it and show it. We had our engineers design and develop a sign cone rack that all of the signs that you would need, the cones or the barrels that you would need on the truck. And then it's 3 individuals on the truck, and they place the cones going down our primaries and mostly our primaries, because we don't have them on the interstates right now. But they place the cones. It's not automated, but they do ride in the back of the cone rack.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of these technologies, and about 10 years ago, they're showing a lot of promise, but I haven't seen them widely used, nor have I seen a lot of reviews. So there's obviously some good ideas, and I'd be interested in other parts of the country that have used them. So if anybody has seen that or would like to add information, please add it to the chat or the question and answer area. All right, Ron is asking, what has the data showed on the collection of work zone speeding fines? And then are these tickets linked to driver's license renewals and anything like that, or is a way to control that? Yeah, anyone from the state? So you've seen any linkages between when people get tickets and then how those may be used in licensing? Okay. Well, I think it's. Oh, go ahead, Martha.
Well, I was going to say we have on the Clearinghouse some examples and studies that others have done, like I think it's Illinois and perhaps Pennsylvania, but I don't, in terms of the effectiveness, but I haven't heard about a linkage between renewing your driver license and the tickets. So we can share some information on the Clearinghouse, but again, I don't think there is any information about linking those two.
Yeah. And Martha, while you're on here, you mentioned some of the data collection efforts that are being tested and underway and linkage of that. Can you explain that a little bit more and how that works with some of the private sector like Waze and others? What you're attempting to do there? Now, I know you didn't have a whole lot of time in your presentation, but I think that's an interesting thing that folks want to know a little bit more about, is that data collection outreach effort.
On the work zone data exchange specification? Yes. Okay, yes. So yes, the US DOT, and I guess let me back up. You see that based on the Clearinghouse, the information that we have, that the FARS data and BLS, we know at a national level the data, the safety data, but not necessarily the mobility or not necessarily where the actual work zones are happening in any given day at a national level. And if you ask a state DOT, some of them may know, some of them may not be aware of where their utility projects or maintenance projects and regular construction projects are happening, how many are happening in that particular day. So with this work zone data exchange effort, we're hoping that state DOTs have a mechanism in place to collect that data and share it on time, basically what exactly is happening, and they could use that data later on to analyze where exactly their event data is happening. The other thing is, and we can share a work zone data exchange web link that we have on our website that will help others if they're interested in being part of the work zone data exchange working group. There have different groups within that working group, one for worker safety, another one on smarter work zone devices. So again, it's a great way for states that perhaps have no idea of work zone data exchange and what we're trying to do, and that uniform platform where everybody, we can get that information and it can be disseminated to others real time. I will share that link for others to be part of that and learn more about it.
Jessica, I think it would be really helpful for you at this point to jump on and talk a little bit about how CPWR is working in tandem with NIOSH and the NORA Construction Sector Council to make data and information available, particularly for this national stand down to prevent struck by incidents. A lot of new information has been developed and posted on the website, fact sheets, good information. Would you mind jumping on and just sharing with all those folks that are listening where they can go to get this information? And it's really brand new, very good information, and it's available at no cost.
Sure. Yeah, I dropped a few links in the chat early on in the webinar, and I will share those again. But we have a couple places you can go, and let me go ahead and share my screen. We have a page for all things struck by that we would encourage you to go ahead and check out. Again, I'll put that link if you don't see it already in the chat, but it has not only the information on what's going on this week, but like Brad said, we have a number of new resources available, including a couple of infographics and then 3 new toolbox talks on dropped objects. We also have all of the different resources that we've created with the NORA NORA Construction Sector Council Struck By Work Group over the years of the stand downs and even before the first stand down. So we have work zone safety resources that go along with this conversation today and all the presentations that have been shared. We also have a series of lift zone safety resources that were new last year, some heavy equipment resources, and then additional topics such as preventing head injuries, resources from NIOSH, the Artba Safety Center, and then we have a link that takes you to additional training materials, a series of FACE reports from NIOSH and different states. And if you're not familiar with the FACE reports, the Fatality Assessment, Control, and Evaluation programs look into different fatalities that occur in depth and write up various reports about them. So you can see exactly what happened and dive a little bit deeper into the root causes. We also have many resources from Brad's organization, Artba, and other partners here that I would encourage you to check out. And then in addition to that, our data center creates a number of new products. About 6 times a year, they put out data bulletins, which cover a variety of topics. And they also have relatively newer tools called data dashboards. These are interactive data dashboards on a variety of topics. two of the ones that are most relevant to today, which I actually shared in the chat and can link again, are the construction focus 4 and the fatality map. So the focus 4 data dashboard allows you to manipulate this data. You can also download it as an Excel sheet, but you can look based on injury type. So we could narrow it down to struck by. You can look at all years between 2011 and 2019, but you can also narrow it down to specific years. You can look by subsector, etc. And then the fatality map, I know a few people were asking questions about specific states. The fatality map allows you to look at incidents geographically. Each of these dots represents a fatality, and we gather that data from OSHA and from media reports. And so you can drill down again. We could look just at struck by, and then you can look at the specifics of each injury. You can narrow it down by state, etc. So again, I will drop some links in the chat now, but thank you, Brad, for the opportunity to share some of those resources.
Well, thank you, Jessica, and for all the great work that you folks at CPWR are doing in your partnership with NIOSH, because I think when we look at overall all the events that are taking place and all the work that is being done, and here we've really kind of focused in on things that are being created by the Federal Highway Administration, by NIOSH, CPWR, our organization, the Clearinghouse, and even OSHA. There's a lot of great information out there, and so I'm hoping that participants here will take advantage of that information, go download it, go share it with others, because there's really no reason not to know. And that's what we're here about in the stand down, is just taking time to stop, share that information, and then act on it. And so I hope you will continue to do that. There have been a few questions. Yes, we will provide, to those that are interested, copies of this presentation will be available. You can go to that page that Jessica shared with the struck by incidents. We'll be able to watch this recorded video and download a PDF version of the slides and other resources that have been discussed here today. So we hope you will do that. Seeing no more questions, and we're right at 2:30, we will thank all of you for participating, and hope that you will join us this afternoon at 3 o'clock and later this week for the other information that's being shared. And again, help us disseminate the information. I see a question just come in. How do we make sure we get it? Well, it's by you. And of course, we all do our parts to share with our organization. So I hope you'll all do the same. So thank you very much, and we'll see you, hopefully many of you, this afternoon and later this week.